Hello and welcome to this section of the Algebra Tutor. In this section we're going to cover how to multiply and divide these real numbers, which are just negative and positive numbers. Now I have to say that again, with multiplying and dividing negative and positive numbers, it can confuse students some. The truth is, to be totally honest with you, multiplying and dividing numbers in algebra, negative and positive numbers, is actually easier than adding and subtracting negative and positive numbers. And I'm totally serious about that. And you'll see why in just a second. So it can get a little confusing with the rules, but the only way to combat that is just to work the problems. I mean, you have to work them and work them and work them. And when you're done working these, go find a book and work some more, check your work with a calculator, and make sure you can do it by the back of your hand. Because if you can't, things in the future of algebra are going to seem harder than they really are. None of this stuff is hard. You just have to know how to tackle it. So let me start out much like I did in the last section and write the little rules down, and then we'll work a ton of problems to give you practice. So when you're multiplying or dividing, back in second grade, I think you probably know that 2 times 2 is 4, for instance. So in that case, a positive number multiplied or divided by a positive number always gave you a positive number. So 2 times 2 is positive 2 times positive 2 is positive 4, and so on. Positive 10 divided by positive 5 gave you a positive 2. So this applies to everything you've done, in second grade math, third grade math, up until now. When you start introducing negative numbers, you're going to have cases when you have negative numbers multiplied or divided by negative numbers. Now, this might surprise you, but when you have this going on, you actually always get a positive number back. It's just the way it is. And then when you have, let me go ahead and draw a little divider here, a negative number multiplied by a positive number, or a positive number multiplied by a negative number, you're always going to get a negative number in the end. So these are the rules of multiplying and dividing. So this is how to multiply and divide real numbers. And I'm going to, agree with you that it is a little confusing at first, mostly because we did very similar rules with addition and subtraction, and those rules were different. The reason those rules were different is because when you're adding and subtracting numbers, you're really thinking about that number line, and you're moving left or you're moving right, and so on. So we simplified all of that number line business to a few rules for you to remember. We talked about those in the last section, and hopefully you're really, really good at that. Multiplying and dividing are actually easier than adding and subtracting, though, because if you remember back to the case when they had different signs, see, this is the case here, different signs of the numbers that you're multiplying or dividing. When we did addition and subtraction, I told you that the sign of the answer was going to depend on the problem. In other words, it was going to depend on which number was bigger. Basically, we did that a lot. When you add and subtract numbers that are different signs, you might have to subtract to get the number, and then the sign of the answer depends on the sign of the bigger number, and you have to go look at that stuff. Well, for multiplying and dividing, it's easier. If you have negative 12 divided by positive 3, the answer is going to be negative, always. If you have positive 10 divided by negative 1, the answer is negative, always. You don't have to look at the sign of the numbers in the problem to figure out what the sign of the answer is. It's always going to be a universal thing. So just to recap one more time, positive number multiplied or divided by a positive number always gives you a positive number. Negative number multiplied or divided by another negative number is always going to give you a positive number. And then when they're different signs, you're always going to get negative numbers. I really think that the easiest way to get practice with this is to work problems. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're just going to do a lot of problems. So what if you have positive 6 multiplied by positive 8? Well, this is like from second grade. You have 8 times 6, or in this case 6 times 8. It's going to give you 48. And since the guys are positive times positive, the answer is always going to be positive. All right? But what if you had negative 8 times negative 7? By the way, with these parentheses next to one another, it means multiplication. So it's kind of like having a multiplication symbol in the middle. So here we have 8 times 7. So first you get the number. 8 times 7 is 56. And then you say, I have negative times negative, which follows this rule. I'm always going to get a positive answer. You don't have to look at the numbers. You don't have to think about which one's bigger. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You're just looking to see what bucket it falls into. So that gives you a negative number. It gives you a positive answer, 56. What if you have 9 times 7. Well, 9 times 7 is 63, and it's positive times positive, which is always going to give me positive for my answer. Okay, now let's move into a different case. What if I have negative 7 times positive 7? Well, I multiply the numbers together. 7 times 7 is 49, and they're different signs. Anytime they're different signs, you basically put a negative sign there. And that follows this here. If it's negative times positive, or if it's positive times negative, you always get a negative sign. You don't have to look at which one's bigger. You don't have to do any of that we did for addition and subtraction. It's very, very easy once you get the hang of it. If basically, when you're multiplying or dividing, if the signs are the same, notice the signs are the same here, you always get positive numbers. If the signs are different, you always get negative numbers. So it's really easier to multiply and divide than it is to add and subtract. What if you have positive 12 times negative 12? Well, 12 times 12 is 144. The signs are different, so you're just going to have a negative sign. That's really all there is to it. Honestly, you know, the rest of the problems here, we're just going to be practicing. We're not going to be doing anything harder or more difficult. We're just going to practice. So let me erase this and we'll do some more. All right, what if we had negative 3/4 multiplied by negative 8/3? So here we're mixing our knowledge of multiplying with our knowledge of fractions. So how do you multiply fractions, first of all? Well, multiplying fractions is easy. You multiply the tops, and then you multiply the bottoms. So let's do that. What is 8 times 3? That's going to give you 24 on the top. What is 4 times 3? That's going to give you 12 on the bottom. We have the same signs here, both negative signs, so the answer is going to give us positive. Now that is the answer, but then we can look and always simplify this. Don't forget fraction is the same thing as division. So 24 divided by 12 is just 2, and that's the answer. All right, let's go to the next guy here. Let's say we have negative 3 multiplied by negative 1/3. Negative 3 multiplied by negative 1/3. Well, what we're going to have here, to make this a little easier, write this negative 3 as negative 3/1, as a fraction, in other words. And then this guy is going to be, let me open the parentheses here, 1/3, just to kind of keep it like this. And I'll wrap this in parentheses to make it easy for you to see. You just multiply the tops, multiply the bottoms. So you multiply the top, 3 times 1 is 3. The bottom is 1 times 3 is 3. Negative times negative always gives us positive. So there you go. And this is not simplified. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And that is the answer. So you see, honestly, it really is a little bit easier than adding and subtracting these numbers, because you don't have to look at the absolute value of anything. You just kind of pick the sign based on the signs of what you have. 3 times negative 4 times negative 6. When you have multiplication like this, you just go left to right. So first we go 3 times negative 4. In other words, we do this guy here. And that's going to give you, since the signs are different, it's going to be negative, and 3 times 4 is 12. Don't forget, we still have to multiply this negative 6 here. So 12 times 6 is 72. Negative times negative is always going to give us a positive number. Remember, when the signs are the same, we get positive numbers. When the signs are different, like they were here, we get negative numbers. So there we have a positive 72. Okay, now let's say we have something like negative 2 times 3 times 4. So again, we work left to right, so we're going to do this guy first. Negative 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. The signs are different, so we have a negative sign. And we're multiplying by positive 4. Again, the signs are different here, so we have a negative sign. 6 times 4 is 24. The signs are different, so we have a negative sign for the answer. Now let's go and look at one that's a little bit longer. Let me switch problems. Again, it's not hard, but I'm just trying to give you practice. 2 times negative 5 times negative 6 times negative 7. So again, you know, we could just do these two, get the answer, and do that times this, get the answer, and then do that times this. But let's break it up into something a little different just to you know, do things a little differently. Let's do these guys here. 2 times negative 5, what do you think that's going to equal to? Well, 2 times 5 is 10, and since these are different signs, it just takes a negative sign. What do you think these are going to equal to? 7 times 6 is 42, And these signs are the same, so that's going to be positive sign. So at the end, what we're doing, don't forget we're multiplying all this together, so really what we have is negative 10 times positive 42. Now how do we do this? 10 times 42 is 420, and the signs are different. So the signs are different, it takes a negative sign. So the answer is negative 420. Now let me show you something, just to make sure you understand something. The fraction 3/4, what does that mean to you, right? Well, we talk about pizzas usually when you talk about fractions. You take a pizza, cut it into 4 pieces, and you take 3 pieces away. That's 3/4 of a pizza, or 3/4 of a pie, or 3/4 of a candy bar, or whatever it is. It's less than a whole number of something. It's a fraction of something, right? But in a bigger sense, fractions are basically division. It's like taking 3 and dividing by 4. You can't really do it, so you just kind of leave it as a fraction, right? But it is sort of like division. Notice that all of these rules up here, we haven't done any division problems yet, but all of these rules, they apply to division the same as they apply also to multiplication. So just to kind of show you something, this division, just to kind of show you why this is true more than anything else, that these rules apply to both of them. And some students might say, why do the same rules apply to multiplication and they also apply to division? Well, it's because multiplication and division are kind of really the same thing. I mean, when you think about it, this is a fraction, but I can rewrite that if I want to as 3/1 times 1/4. Wouldn't you all agree? We know how to multiply fractions, so if we start from here, how would we do this? 3 times 1 gives me 3, 1 times 4 gives me 4. So you see, we've taken this division, really, and we have changed it into multiplication of two things. So really I'm showing you that you can take division and you can kind of represent it as multiplication, and because you can do that, that basically means that all of these rules that apply to multiplication also apply to division. I'm just kind of showing you that.